Yeah.
Sons, how are you? How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend the afternoon with us. So today's career conversation is titled My Career in Social Justice. I don't know if you know, but the 5 principles of social justice are participation, equity, access, diversity, and human rights. Just knowing that has me looking forward to the enriching conversation that's going to happen today. So before I introduce our panelists today,
Seminar.
okay. Before I introduce our panelists today, I just want to explain how today's proceedings are going to go. So could everybody just make sure that they've muted their microphones throughout the proceedings? Could everyone please make sure that their cameras are off throughout the proceedings? I'm going to introduce our panelists and I'm going to ask them a set of questions. When they're done answering the set of questions, I'm going to open it to the floor for you to ask questions. Your questions you can pose in the chat. I have a very capable colleague in the chat called Megan, who's going to sort of give me those questions and then I'll pose them to our panelists. Okay, so could our panelists please put on their cameras so that everybody can see who is gracing our presence today. Okay, so on our panel today, we have Nolundi, who's a director at the Land and Accountability Research Center. And we have Sherylle, who is the regional director of the Legal Resources Center. And we have Athenkosi, who's head of province, Eastern Cape at Equal Education. Okay. Hello, Athenkosi, I can see you.
Hi, Asla. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so can our panelists keep their cameras on throughout the duration of this conversation, please? Okay. So the first question, Athenkosi, can you take this one first, and then Sherylle, and then Nolundi? Can you give us a brief account of your career journey? Okay, so what is it that you studied? What was your first job, and then what is your second job? And yeah, so just for the audience to get a sense of who is it that we're talking to. Over to you, Athenkosi.
Okay, it's quite a long answer that I have, but I'll try to keep it very brief. So I basically did all my degrees and certificates at UCT. I did a Bachelor of Social Science, majoring in psychology, gender studies, and sociology. And then I did an honors in gender and transformation at the AGI. And then I went on to do a master's in public health, primarily because I've had the interest in the intersection between health outcomes and sort of social dynamics. So I wanted to marry my love of health sciences with social sciences, and then it came together quite well. So my first job was as a research assistant at AIDS Free World, where I worked on a study in Khayelitsha at TAC. And then I moved on to my first real big job at the Bertha Center for Social Innovation, which was located at the Graduate School of Business, where I worked on profiling healthcare innovations across South Africa, Zambia, and Kenya. And then I moved on to work for the DG primarily a funder that focuses on funding social programs across South Africa. So I worked in a project that sought to empower young women in a single geographical area. So trying different methodologies other than biomedical prevention to prevent the spread of HIV among young women who are most vulnerable. So we're talking about young women aged 15 to 29. And then I spent a couple of years there. A huge bulk of my work experience has been there. And then now I am working in the education sector, which is eco-education. So mainly focusing on government accountability and making sure that there's equitable access to education, and also proper infrastructure, especially within the Eastern Cape, where we are faced with a huge infrastructure backlog problem, and we have young learners learning in mud schools and exposed to things like asbestos on a daily basis. So in a nutshell, that's what I studied and what I do now. I try to rush through it. So if people have questions, they can just ask me throughout the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Sherylle, can you tell us what it is that you studied and, where it is that you worked, etc.?
Thanks, Azola. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. So I think I'm probably one of the oldest member of this panel. So my days go back to the early 1990s when I started at university. So we were still transitioning from, having a background, basic education background during the apartheid education system and going through this transition in the early 1990s at university, where still tainted by an apartheid curriculum, but where our political awareness was something that came to the fore, especially in my early days at the University of, what it was called then, University of Durban, Westville. So we were still operating, well, now it's integrated and it's called the University of KwaZulu-Natal, but before it was basically two separate universities, University of Natal, which was more for the bourgeois, and the University of Durban, Westville, which we would, alumni love to call it the Bush University. But I think for me personally, it's where my political awareness, my passion for social justice came from. At those early stages, students were very politicized. I was straddling between the PAC and the ANC. I didn't commit, but really a political awareness came in, and me studying law was just a natural fit for me. So I completed at that time, it used to be a Bachelor of Arts degree in law, and then an LLB at the University of Durban, Westville. So I then, I come from a working class background, so, and I think a lot of people on this call would identify, even during these times, that for Black lawyers or learners of color at that time, you didn't have much choices about what you wanted to do in terms of your career path. You had to work, you had to pay your brown or your black tax. So I had to immediately, find articles, and I did that at the Legal Aid Board in Zululand, which is an awesome experience for me, because working in rural KwaZulu-Natal was, and working in the courts at that time was something I think that every person should go through, because it really humbles you, dealing with people in those types of courts. So immediately thereafter, obviously, just finding jobs, finding careers, and at that time I was still young and naive, and didn't know what to do. So ended up, getting bored with the first job that I had, which was a professional assistant, which is really a glorified taxi driver, taxing your boss to court and the clients to court and going to the master's office, and that was a general litigation practice. So I decided to start my own practice because I was fed up with that. And then decided to move to Johannesburg to be a legal advisor at at a legal expenses insurance company. It was a good experience for me because I learned a lot of tools in terms of commercial law practice. But I did have that sense of longing to make a difference, to not just use my theoretical skills as in law to make money. I felt that there was something missing in my life. And that's where the calling to Lawyers for Human Rights, which is my first social justice organization that I joined. I joined their refugee and migrant rights program. I headed that program. And I think that that's where I found value in what I've been studying for essentially for 5 years and then 2 years of articles. After Lawyers for Human Rights, I joined the Equal Education Law Center in Cape Town. Again, it was a different experience because equal education really focused on access to basic education and educational law. But it was a good challenge for me because I worked closely with Equal Education, which is a social movement. It's a rewarding experience working with grassroots, a grassroots movement, working with learners, also a very politicized and socially conscious movement. And Equal Education Law Center worked, it was the sister organization of Equal Education. So we worked very closely with them. And we saw how legal advocacy marries social mobilization and how that marriage actually is such a good marriage and had very high impact in the work that they did. And look, finally, when the LRC called and knocked on my door, I couldn't say no. So LRC has got a over 40-year history in public interest litigation. They've been at the forefront, pre and post apartheid, of abolishing systems of oppression, of advocating for human rights, of defending rights defenders. And so that's where I am right now, and still doing what I'm doing and still loving what I'm doing. Thank you, Asola.
Thank you so much for that. Now, before I hand over to Nolundi, I'm really enjoying the diversity in the answers. We're constantly telling our students, carve out your unique career journey. And the way you both just nicely articulated sort of the personal aspects that influenced this journey and the studying. Like, for me, it's like, yay, they're saying what I preach all the time. So Nolundi, handing over to you, can you give us a brief account of your career journey?
Sure. Thanks, Azola, for inviting me, and hello to everybody who's joining us. So I think my career journey is probably a lot less diverse than both Sherylle's and Athenkosis, in that I've only actually ever really worked for one institution, which is UCT. So I studied a BA, majored in English and sociology, and then I did my LLB. I then did an LLM in public interest, or in public law. My particular topic of interest was related to women's land rights under customary law. And so I kind of landed my first job by accident. I had no plan at the end of final year. And my supervisor of a research paper that I had to do in my law degree was also the director of a center, and so she invited me to join that center as a junior researcher at the time. And so, yeah, that's kind of began my employment journey through what was at that point the Law, Race and Gender Research Unit. It then graduated and became the Center for Law and Society. And within the Center for Law and Society, I specifically worked as project coordinator on a project called the Rural Women's Action Research Project, which predominantly focused on kind of the intersection between customary law, the Constitution, and kind of people's lived realities. That project has then grown into its own center, and that's where I am now, and that's the center that I am the director of. Yeah, and as I say, in a part, my career journey was by accident, but it also, was perhaps a guided accident, if you will, in that, at the end of my law degree, there were a lot of things that didn't make sense and that I felt hadn't been sufficiently aired or kind of explored through my law degree. And a lot of that was around, where does the stuff that is familiar to, a lot of Black and brown students, where does that all fit? Where is the stuff that we see, in the rural Eastern Cape? Where is the stuff that people see in rural KZN? And how does that actually kind of fit into this constitutional framework that we're taught? And so it really was the type of research that the unit that I joined was doing that really kind of sparked my interest, and, as I say, accidentally kind of crafted a career path that really is about a niche kind of investigation at what it looks like to sit at that intersection and at that nexus between customary law, lived experience, constitutional principles, and how we make all of that fit into the kind of the democratic construction of South Africa.
Okay, wow, thank you so much for that. The answers that all of you are giving me are actually so affirming. Nolundi, I think a lot of students could actually resonate with what it is that you're sharing. And another interesting point is we constantly tell students, use your networks. And what you're explaining with the supervisor situation is what could actually help another student who's actually sitting here and watching. And a second point I want to draw the students' attention to is just how strategic you can be with your thesis title and how that can actually open certain doors as well. So thank you very much for giving us that, because I think the dots are going to be connecting with our audience. So our second question, so Sherylle, please answer this first, and then Nolundi, and then Athenkosi, is, can you tell us about your organization? So obviously students are thinking, I'm interested in human rights, I'm interested in social justice, but how do I choose? Is there a choosing situation? Is it a passion thing? So it would be nice to get a sense of what is your organization about? What is it all about, and what do you do? So if I'm thinking, I want to be the director at LOC, what is it that I would possibly be doing? What skills are you using in this day-to-day job? Sherylle, over to you.
So thanks, Zola. With, as I said, with yes. So with the can you hear me? Because I got a message that my connection's bad. Okay, so with the, as I said, the Legal Resources Center is one of the oldest non-for-profit law clinics. So a lot of our work, historically has been clinic-based. So, if you were sitting at a law firm doing in a general litigation practice, doing collections or criminal matters, you're essentially doing the same sort of clinical work, but you're doing it in an NGO setting on really constitutional issues or human rights issues that you've dealt with. And historically, obviously, the LRC has been much more than that. It really looked at the inception of dismantling the legal structures of apartheid South Africa, and then engaging, post 1994 in strategic litigation interventions aimed at ensuring that people that live in conditions of poverty, marginalized groups, had an organization that they could turn to when their rights were violated or the law had to be changed. So, the LRC played a very significant role in dismantling apartheid, abolishing the death penalty, corporal punishment, advancing and protecting the constitutional rights of women, girls, and persons with disabilities, access to healthcare, environmental justice. So, and recently our focus is on land reform and education rights. So all of these things form part and parcel of our work. And we use the law as a transformative tool in order to bring about change, give meaning to the Constitution post-democracy, and pre-democracy was to really use the law or use the courts to dismantle oppressive legal instruments and conduct. So, like any lawyer, you would need, very soft and hard skills, and that would involve you being a very analytical thinker, you being able to be patient. I think patience is one of the things that a lot of lawyers, get into law practice and think that it's going to be easy, but patience is something. Reading copious amounts of cases and literature is something that is the boring part of litigation practice, but it's an essential part of litigation practice. Just in terms of I recently, Mark Hayward is the current editor of the Daily Maverick and previous director of Section 27, which is another legal non-profit company. He basically said that there were, what is the role of a social justice lawyer as opposed to just an ordinary lawyer? And the 5 things he mentioned was that social justice lawyers need to get political, and not get political as in you now need to start a political party, but getting political is really about understanding the political and socio-economic context in which we live. So it's a much broader question rather than what is the law and how do I apply the law, but it's what is the socio-economic context and political context in which we are operating in, and how do we use our skills as lawyers to actually address those socioeconomic problems. The second was to push boundaries, because not everything is plain and simple. When you're a conveyancing attorney, it's simple. The law is there, the procedures are there, the guidelines are there. But in social justice work, you need to push the boundary, you need to question the law. And we've done that at the LRC, during the laws were oppressive. So we didn't, as lawyers, just comply with the law. We pushed the boundaries and we said, is that law justified? Is that law equitable? Is that law just? And so we needed to push the boundaries. The third thing is to rediscover your humility, because a lot of our lawyers forget that. We need to be humble. We need to work with grassroots movements. We need to be there on the ground. It's not a desk job. It's definitely not a and the fourth thing is to be committed to the cause. So once you're in it, once you hear whatever organization you work for, whether it's Equal Education, whether it's LARC, whether it's the LRC, it's not just a job. You need to believe in the cause and you need to promote that cause, and it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day calling that you need to be committed to the cause. And the last thing is to take risks. So if you want to if you don't want to be a revolutionary, you want to sit back and you want to say, I don't want to cause ripples and waves, then a career in social justice is not for you. Because we need to put couples with pushing boundaries, taking risks. So those are the 5 things which resonated with me. I think it's important that that in terms of where you want to go in terms of your career, you need to remember those 5 basic roles that a social justice lawyer needs to have. And there's various opportunities out there for you. If the Legal Resource Center is a purely legal NGO, so we use litigation, but we also use research, we use advocacy, campaigning, social media campaigning to promote the cause. But there's other organizations that only have a research aspect to it and only have a campaigning aspect to it. So where would you fit as a lawyer, as a legal student? I think that there's a lot of organizations that offer all of those components, and then there's some that are specialized. With the LRC, we benefited from the fact that we did not ring fence ourselves into one or other box. We didn't say we were only education or only land. We looked at again the socioeconomic and political context and says and our constitution and say where's the need, how do we dismantle the root causes of inequalities and oppression, and how do we use our legal skills to dismantle that.
Wow, thank you so much. That was also amazing. Thank you. Nolundi, over to you.
So the Lands and Accountability Research Center is based in the Department of Public Law at the university, in the university's Faculty of Law. And our kind of main business is that we're a research center predominantly. And so the thing that, somewhat differently is that we use our research quite actively across kind of a three-pronged strategy. So we use our research in support of mobilization and advocacy initiatives. And so, we have partners who are activist organizations who, are wanting to run a campaign. And so what we'll do is we will, use the research that we have, the legal analysis that we have, the understanding of the laws that we have to support that particular type of activity. We also do research in the sense of academic research, and so we seek to publish in the academic space. We seek to, contribute our research towards teaching as well. And then we also do research in support of litigation. And so we've worked a lot over the years with the LRC in supporting them to kind of bring particular cases that are about strategically important issues related to people's rights under customary law. Our center specializes in the theme or the sort of legal area of customary law, and we work across three kind of themes or three areas within the customary law context. So we work on issues to do with land rights, we work on issues to do with traditional governance, so that's traditional leadership, questions of democracy within the former homeland areas, and then we work on issues related to communities that are affected by mining. And as I say, all of our work is in the areas that would have been called the Bantustans in the language of apartheid. So, for example, we don't do work in the Western Cape, but rather a lot of our work involves traveling across kind of the 5 or 6 provinces that would form the former homeland area. And so, the kind of skills that are uppermost, I guess, in what we do are really, I would say, skills that are ultimately leading you back to, for me, a main theme, which is that I think it's important to be curious, right? And so the core part of sort of what we hope to bring out of the members of our team is a curiosity to ask, why is customary law treated like this? Why is the law in South Africa structured in this particular way? Why is the state choosing to, treat rural communities in this particular way? So certainly those kind of skills that are related to curiosity, so skills around analysis, the ability to kind of read and analyze and theorize what you're reading, the ability to also